Hello and welcome to Plants Cannabis Processing Talks by SciPhy Systems. I'm Emmett McGregor, SciPhy Systems CEO, and today we have a special panel focused on the topic of vape technology. I have some really amazing guests on, as well as a guest host. Steve Fuhr, our Director of Business Development, is going to be hosting this conversation and getting into the nitty-gritty of what's changed in vape technology recently and how to optimize your vape manufacturing business. I'll hand it over to Steve to introduce our guests, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Well, Emmett, thank you for that great introduction. I'd like to introduce three of our esteemed experts in the industry. We have Adam Rothstein, who's the Vice President of New Business Development for Ispire, a Vape Cart manufacturer. We also have Kyle Michael with ASCERA, who's a leading Vape Cart provider in North America, and Sawyer Sheppard, who's a Senior Account Executive at Vape-Jet. Vape-Jet is a maker of machines that fill vape carts and dabbable containers. Before we get into today's podcast, I'd like to encourage everybody to pick up the most recent copy of Marijuana Venture magazine. In it this month, Kyle and myself have co-authored an article called The Death of Distillation. And essentially what this article talks about is cutting-edge extractors using more efficient extraction technology and post-processing so they can avoid going through the expensive and time-consuming distillation process to make better vape carts. And we'll talk more about that later. But before we do, let's get in and Adam, maybe you could start by telling us a little bit more about yourself, your company, and the products that you represent.
Yeah, of course. My name is Adam Rothstein, as you mentioned, VP of Business Development at Ispire. I've been with the company since early on. It's been a little bit over 4 years now. It's also really cool. I just want to call it out. You guys have been at your same companies for multiple years, and it's awesome to see that in the cannabis industry. It's super rare. So being on a panel with those who are passionate and actually building something larger than themselves is just really, really cool. So I appreciate all of your time and an honor to be here with all of you. But we launched, and our company history actually it's pretty neat. Our founder was the first one to bring e-cigarettes over to North America. So back in 2013, when the original mods were coming out, he was involved with that early technology, built a legacy in the nicotine industry, and then we launched Ispire 4.5 years ago as the cannabis division of that company. So I was in the cannabis industry in California at the time. I'm about 8 years in on the legal side, and then I had my time in Detroit where I was not on the legal side per se, but we'll say over half my life has been devoted to cannabis now. Very passionate about the plant, consumer experience. And at this point, it's really cool to be a technology company where we can focus on consumer safety, because the one thing that really hasn't been focused on with a lot of this being manufactured overseas is doing proper long-term testing and digging into a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So, having been at a company and working in vape so long, I'm sure Kyle can relate to, and Sawyer, you as well. Once you know so much about the vape pen, there's really only so much to know. Then you start digging in on how does it affect me? And that's what's driven this conversation, what we're going to discuss at greater length here. But it's opened my eyes to a lot more. The fact that we really haven't over a decade focused on any of these things to set a bar is slightly terrifying, but I'm happy to be a part of it and find, again, passionate, like-minded people to have this conversation.
That's great, Adam. Thank you. Kyle, why don't you do the same? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your products, and who you represent.
Thank you. My name is Kyle Michael. I'm calling in from up here in Canada. Seems like so far away right now, Steve, with what's going on with the global tariff trade and all of these things that are swirling and affecting our businesses. But I am the founder and brand manager of ASCERA. We are pioneers in zirconia ceramic vape carts. I believe we're the first branded zirconia cart in North America. Been pushing these out for about 5 years now. And personally, I'm in my third decade of cannabis work. So I would say the majority of my adult life has been plant touching, plant enjoying, and got into extraction circa 12 years ago. And from working with Shatter, I discovered oil and the benefits of oil and the wonders of oil. And so been focused on oil packaging for about 10 years now, and starting with delivery devices for edible oils with precise dosage control. And then naturally about 6 years ago, decided to take a deep dive into vape distribution, and what a journey it's been. Right now, I'm proud to say that ASCERA is supplying several of the hottest brands in the Canadian market, and we have multiple brands in the US market, and we've got some good things happening in Europe, and looking forward to Mexico and Brazil and beyond. So it's pretty exciting time to be in the cannabis trade, I find, despite the challenges. But I'm really happy to be here with you, Steve, and the rest of this panel. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Sawyer, your turn. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, what's going on, guys? Yeah, honored to be here. Know Adam, I know Kyle, I know SciPhy really well. You guys have been always fantastic partners to work with and to collaborate with. So, you know, being in the industry for about 5 years myself, 4.5 or so, kind of right there with Adam, getting to see, you know, just the industry evolve so rapidly in a very short period of time, and see the change in vape devices, and then get to service our customers and allow them a way to be able to rapidly iterate with the changing market and the changing form factors and all of the different oil formulations that require such specificity when it comes to how that oil is actually handled when it gets to the vape cart, to give that consumer, you know, the proper experience. You know, these are very volatile compounds that, if not treated correctly, you're not going to be able to enjoy when you finally get to take your first hit of that vape. So Vape-Jet was founded, you know, in 2019, and really just out of necessity for making a machine that's truly made for cannabis and has the versatility to keep up with how fast this industry is moving. So our big thing really was machine vision. That's how we started out. Ryan Hoyt made the machine out of necessity for himself. It's kind of past the 7-year mark here, but Ryan had his own lab where he was finding that hand filling just wasn't working, and none of the machines on market worked for his purposes, especially when it comes to these higher terpene extracts. And through his background in satellite communications, the military, camera technologies, it kind of all just came together to make a machine that's ready for almost anything, any device that's put out, and as well specifically made for resins and rosins.
Sawyer, that's a great introduction to the first question I wanted to ask, because I think most of us would agree the cannabis industry has been in a constant evolution. And I'll put this question first out to Kyle and Adam. What would you consider to be the major features of vape hardware that are going to dictate how these features perform? Adam, why don't you take it first?
Well, there's only a few components that are really going to dictate it. The viscosity of the oil, first and foremost. Every formulation is different. We can't just call something a live resin per se and expect everyone to be the same. Even for blends where people say they're putting an 8% distillate in, or 8% terp with a distillate, right? It's really hearsay, because each terpene is slightly different too. So validation when it comes to all of this is most important. We stress with all of our partners, if it takes 50, if it takes 100, even if it takes our team coming out to validate a jig and tray that we made with the Vape-Jet team with your Vape-Jet, all of that is extremely important. There's a lot of risk that goes into changing vape hardware. We understand that, but working with automation companies who help build these jigs and trays and having engineers stateside to be able to go on site and actually help our partners with that white glove service truly does help. But back to what we're looking at in a vape pen here, your aperture holes are going to dictate the oil flow into the heating core. How many coils you have in the device and the surface area inside of that heating core will also dictate how much vapor production you're going to get. The airflow is also important. How far are you letting that vapor go before it gets to the consumer's mouth and throat? That way you could not have that burning sensation. One of the worst and daggering things for me, like as a vape manufacturer, is when you hand a vape pen to someone and they don't like it because it burned their throat.
Yep.
And this was industry standard for years, until there was enough people on this side of the pond who were saying, hey, we need to change this because it should be a good experience, right? The terpenes vaporize at a much lower temperature than what's hurting my throat. So, I mean, really, those are the main factors that we tweak. There's certain materials that ramp up the heating core to a higher temperature quicker than others. A lot of them go on a fluctuating scale. That way you can kind of hover at that sweet spot of vaporization. But in terms of the cart, it really just comes down to the materials and how quickly that oil flows as it heats.
And Kyle, what would you like to add to that with a particular emphasis on how you see the differences in your ceramic carts performing with other carts?
Thank you, Steve. I think it comes down to a couple of hardware fundamentals, starting with the core technology. So with ASCERA's proprietary ceramic heating cores, we have a low leach, clean vaporization that protects the terpene integrity and avoids heavy metal contamination. The goal when we established ASCERA was to prepare for the GMP markets of Europe. So really pushing towards a medical grade performance. But speaking from a Canadian perspective, when I started distributing vapes circa 5-6 years ago, the entire market was on half gram, third gram, 99% distillate carts out there. But the shift from distillate dominant cartridges to live resin and rosin required a complete rethink of the materials and the structures of these vape pens. So ASCERA, I'm proud to say we have an in-house engineer, R&D department, and we've been focusing on upgrading the porosity control in the ceramic cores to better handle the low viscosity terpene rich formats. So it comes down to the airflow and the engineering of how that coil is operating and the heat transfer within the chamber inside the post, because the zirconia ceramic material doesn't transfer heat the same way as traditional steel cartridges. So we designed the control airflow that stabilizes the viscosity variability and maintains the taste across full spectrum oils, including high terpene cannabinoid rich formulations. So we're really focused on, let's say, the high end oil market. And as you pointed out, Steve, the market needs to shift out of vaping distillate and vaping pure terpene rich oils. And that's that full spectrum effect. I like to say it's the lights and lasers at the concert.
On that note, Kyle, when you're talking about materials, like this is something that's like a recent discovery we came across that I want everyone to know, just when we look at consumer safety with high terpenes specifically. We partnered with Raw Garden on one of their new all-in-one devices, and it took over a year to bring the device to market. You got one, awesome, lucky man. I'm slightly jealous right now. Mine's empty on my desk, but it was building this low temp postless design, which would allow the oil not to overheat to protect the terpenes. But we were discovering a burnt taste as we were doing our R&D, and we're like, it's not the engine, like something's off with this. And as we discovered it, there was a PCTG plastic tank, which has been an industry standard tank for cartridges and disposables since the beginning. But with high terpene content, specifically limonene, which would be the most caustic of them, at a sustained high temperature, it was actually eating away at the PCTG. So we upgraded the plastic to a PA12, upped our testing in the oven, put an even higher limonene content, and it didn't experience any degradation. So this was like kind of like a light bulb moment to say, like, well, look, if we're going to start looking at these higher end oils and start educating the consumer, we also need to look at the further exploration of this material and what it's going to do at a sustained temperatures. What if it sits in someone's hot car for an hour in the sun? Or what if they're doing blinkers like all the kids are doing nowadays? Like, that seems to be a game. Like if it's getting that hot, is there plastic that's degrading that could then be inhaled, which could cause harm? Like, these are all things that I just want to have like a PSA moment where it's like, and I know you use high quality components too. Like when you look at like ceramics and quartz, like there's certain even levels of ceramic that you have to go to, and visiting the factory, you can see it yourself. So like you stand by your product and you smoke your own product, and I respect you for that because you actually care about the quality that you put into it. So I just wanted to note, like when we're talking about this stuff, like material change, as we look at terpenes, which are caustic by nature and corrosive, extremely, extremely important. So just please don't smoke plastics. That's
Yep.
the only thing I'm trying to say.
Thanks so much, Adam, for bringing that up. I've had this gut feeling for years that PCTG wasn't safe, and I've challenged many vape dealers that are approaching me to prove that it's safe. But I'm proud to say that I've personally never sold a PCTG tank. Every tank I've ever sold uses lab grade glass because I've been aware of the caustic nature of terpenes since the beginning. At ASCERA, we've taken it a step further with our gasketry as well. It's not commonly known that, like PCTG, regular silicone is also degraded by high terpene content. So ASCERA has been a pioneer with using FKM gasketry, which is a floral elastic polymer commonly referred to as Viton. So we don't have a patent on that. We've been doing it for over 4 years, and I'm very surprised that none of the other vape companies have followed suit, because silicone is another hidden danger in the vape world. And again, material selection is crucial to making vape safer. Thank you.
You know, guys, as you're saying this, it brings me back to the whole vitamin E acetate scare that we had a couple of years ago, where, you know, here we have this, you know, cut that was used in vape carts that was perceived as being safe. And if you eat vitamin E acetate, it is safe. But the minute you start exposing it to high temperatures and isomerizing the chemicals, suddenly you're making dangerous elements. And so it's good to see you guys are doing that R&D and making sure that what's going in these carts is safe. And with that, Sawyer, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how Vape-Jet is complementing and evolving with some of the changes in the vape carts themselves as it relates to your filling technology.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Talking about consumer safety, we designed the machine with the volatility of terpenes and plastics completely in mind. So the whole machine is made from stainless Viton, Kyle, to your point, PTFE, and that's it. That's the only thing that's in the fluid path. So when you look at how it actually operates and how many variables as well are considered and have to be considered when each extract on live resin and rosin is different, the machine's got to get a whole lot more versatile. You got to understand how fast that pump's moving, understand the backstroke, the forward stroke, be able to configure those things. Otherwise, for things like resins and rosins, for example, you can encounter a champagne bubbling effect where, you know, it may not be the biggest issue on the flavor component, but retail's not going to sell that. And additionally, you know, one of the big things we do that really was kind of a light bulb moment, I think, for the industry is that the whole machine is pressurized with nitrogen. So you actually have, you know, way less heat. You know, it's not oxidizing. Oil is, especially on the higher terpene side, when it's exposed to open air, it's going to oxidize and the terpenes are going to evaporate faster and faster. Just, you know, higher the temperature, the faster that flavor is going to go. These producers and cultivars spent, you know, we stand on the backs of giants here, guys. You know, I can't say that I'm a part of that, but if we're going to represent the beautiful art that the community's created through cultivating these genetics and just decide, hey, flavor doesn't matter. Hey, doesn't matter if it's, you know, turning brown in the vape cart. We'd be doing a huge disservice to our clients in representing their product. And I can tell, you know, Adam and Kyle, you guys understand that too. Your guys' companies are locked in and understanding of exactly what your producers need to showcase your product. But it really is, to your guys' point, a lot of variables at play. So the precision and repeatability to make it, hey, we're going to put all of these settings on how that pump behaves, the nitrogen pressure, the temperatures on, you know, throughout the entire fluid path, all into one easy drop down. That's what matters, because each strain is going to be different. If you're not calibrating for that, you're going to have negative results, and you're not going to know why either sometimes, because you can't even control it.
Good point, Sawyer. I think all of you have done a great job telling us a little bit about some of the technology that's evolved over the last few years. If I could put one question, I'll start out to Adam. What do you see on the horizon, Adam, as some of the one piece of leading technology in vape carts that's emerging?
On the technology side, I think a lot of shifts are pulling over. We're seeing trends from nicotine to the alternative hemp CBD space, then pull into THC markets and recreational and medical markets. It's the larger format tank. Then you get your digital screen, which has your battery and your puff count, your variable voltage features, your preheat functions, your postless designs. And then it becomes we're all fish when we go in the store. People buy with their eyes. Like, how do we make it? How do we make the device branded and on brand and sexy so a consumer wants to show it off? But there's also and it's more trend here in the U.S. that would, I imagine, trickle outward. Cartridges at this point, like, if price is one thing, everybody wants to go cheap because there's inflation, but discretion, like if you have a cartridge here, people know you're smoking weed. Or if you have a disposable unit or a pod system, it's a little bit more discreet. So it's tough. But there's going to be a shift toward pods at some point here soon too. I know Europe's looking at doing all that. I'm very passionate about pushing pod systems over sometime too, but we're a ways away, I think, stateside from doing it. But the trends are all the same. All the markets that were allowed to go up larger than 1 ml are in that 2 ml, 3 ml. I don't think the hemp space did it right by going 5 ml, like 9 ml. We don't need a camelback of oil on our back by any means, but there is a value add to not throwing, if you have a disposable unit, right? If you have 2 ml or 3 ml of oil in it, 2 ml, I think a core, it's probably all it's going to last through, honestly, if you want a good experience. But then you're throwing away half as many batteries. And that's at least a little bit better in my mind, right? The brand can make more margin on the oil by putting 2 grams of distillate in the pen. The fixed cost of the battery doesn't hurt them as much. The consumer gets a better value, and we save the world a little bit at the time. Yep. So in that regard, I'm okay with markets going up a little bit in tank sizes. As markets mature, oil prices come down, and they're able to go up. With live resin coming back and becoming more popular as is rosin, you are seeing that emergence of the 0.5 gram and 1 gram coming back up in mature markets, though, because the oil is more expensive. So it evens itself out as like the connoisseur's higher end option.
And Kyle, what do you see as the number one change on the horizon for vape carts right now?
Thanks for asking, Steve. It comes down to a line in the sand between good vapes and bad vapes. A good vape protects the formulation. There's no heavy metals, there's no clogging, consistent wicking, a full flavor expression, where a bad vape undermines the oil and the experience and also the brand reputation of the people that are putting their money on the shelf, if you will. So I think right now it comes down to formulation and viscosity. How well does your device adapt to the client's oil? So from my perspective, despite the, let's say, external features of what a vape can do, some of the points you mentioned, Adam, of all the fancy new LED screens and functions and blinking lights and glitter and all these things people can do, right? But to me, flavor is king. So we're still very much focused on flavor performance. And in my opinion, that's determined by how well the device handles that viscosity. If it's too thick, it'll burn or clog. If it's too thin, you can flood the coil and lose control. So our clients have been using ASCERA hardware with everything from live resin, live rosin, the HTE sauces, and we fine tune our hardware to match spec. So if anybody is out there that is listening, wants to try ASCERA, we put together these little triple viscosity packs, and we have 3 different coil formulations, low, medium, and high. And in my opinion, you can't make one vape to suit all oil. So we put out 3 lows, 4 mediums, and 3 highs in these triple packs, and we send them to the client and say, please try our carts with your oil and tell us which coil worked the best. Because like rosin every rosin's a snowflake. You can't put a target on rosin and say it's like this, because it's all different. So with the low, medium, high viscosity coils that we put out, we tailor our tanks to suit the oil and deliver that flavor. So we're very focused on flavor as the prime directive at ASCERA.
That's a good point. And actually, I'd like to direct a question towards Sawyer, because Vape-Jet is intimately involved in the manufacturing process of these vape carts. Tell us, Sawyer, how does that viscosity in the oil impact performance of the cart? And where do you see some of these newer THCA, live resin, rosin type products affecting vape cart performance?
Yeah, definitely. On the manufacturing side, we've had to gear towards those larger formats. And, thankfully, Vape-Jet, as long as it can fit on the platform of the machine and we can put a needle in it, we're good. So we've been able to cater to that. You can go all the way up to a 5 ml. We do have, clients in the hemp space. We take THCA space. Our bread and butter really is the higher terpene extracts. And, we've got, I think some of the biggest key points, though, there to just speak to what, Kyle was talking about, is that really every single rosin is different. So we really have to fine tune all of that throughout the process. If you don't, you're just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. I've seen customers who haven't, and especially in the newer markets, it's been tough to see. But I think it's a beautiful thing when you see people like Adam and Kyle do their work in consultation, and to be able to ask the right questions, to be able to take the extra time to step ahead of their clients and say, hey, can we get a COA? Hey, we're going to send samples. Hey, this is a collaborative thing. This is, you're going to tell me what works. We're going to go through and collaboratively get on a video call and do that R&D specifically with your oil, and consultatively find that kind of Goldilocks zone between temperature, time, speed, as well as device, of course, too, right? To make sure that the end user has that perfect experience. Terpenes are expressed. It's not leaking. It's not oxidized. You're filling with efficiency. You've got an extremely repeatable process. And yeah, to Adam's point, we're going to continue to keep up the pace on being able to fill AIOs. It's been our MO to fill whatever the market throws at us. At the same time, though, I'm excited to see some pod systems hit the market. I think that it has been a bit of a shame, but the consumer and the convenience and the form factor in a disposable that is more convenient and discreet, it speaks volumes to the consumers, and the branding opportunities are there. Retail loves them. So I think we're all kind of here as vendors to these producers, and we're slowly consulting them towards maybe a better solution on the way of sustainability. However, first and foremost, we have to make sure that their product is primed for success for the market, and their fill techs are loving their job. Their thumbs aren't hurting. They're not confused. They don't have temperatures that fluctuate based on ambient, environments and things like that. They don't have oxidation and this sort of R&D mystery that, we've probably solved 500 times with the likes of great hardware manufacturers as well in collaboration. It really does take a team, and usually a lot of times the brand, all they know is that they have an amazing selling vape, and that's what they don't need to know necessarily everything, but if we can just educate, then I think we're doing our job.
That's an interesting point. Adam, how do you educate a customer that may not know a lot about vape carts and really lead them to buying the right technology for their product?
Education is paramount. The ones who ask the right questions up front and are willing to be guided, it's honestly the most fun projects. Again, I've been vaping for 7 or 8 years, but I didn't really know about it until I ingrained myself when I started here 4.5 years ago. And now taking people down that journey where you stress cheap is expensive, going through the validation, going through quality, we can get to the fun stuff and do the design and all the jazz hands later, but finding like-minded people who are really want the experience to go, oh, that's and I'll keep talking about the raw garden experience, because they were a team of biochemical engineers who were we want to build a really, really good product for the consumer. We want the experience to be next level. That's where it needs to go. You need to be driving toward consumer safety and consumer experience always. And that's kind of where all of our original when our original hardware came in, we're like, okay, well, now that we have a team here in the US, how do we take this with all of our US partners, start doing testing And to Kyle's point, like your kit you had there, it's awesome, dude. Like we send out a viscometer to the labs we go to and send our engineer out to take readings if they need help using it, so we can capture the data and make recommendations based on an exact reading, right? Because it is a science. We're all here because everything we do is scientific, right? When we take everything to an actual finite number, we can make the best recommendation for you. Yep. So it's showing people the doors, explaining how we got there and why we got there, and then you can give them that white glove service. But there's also like when you've done it a few times, or people can tell that you want to help them succeed, that helps drive that whole conversation of the exploration of more questions, because they feel like if you've done it before and had success, it obviously helps. But if you're passionate about it and your heart's in it, that goes 10 times further than anything. That's the only thing I think that might go further than a finite number when you look at like business development and bringing someone into this exploration and learning process, because that's going to make them want to learn more. Yeah, right? This isn't just like a PowerPoint presentation where we're like, hey, this is this and this is that, and study it and remember it. Like, no, we're building something, and it's a new, unique project every time. Slightly different. Same, but different.
Adam, you hit a key point, which is cheap is expensive. I've been in this business 13 years now, and I've seen companies put out of business because they used a cheap vape cart. Kyle and I have talked about this before, where people, the first thing they want is the cheapest. Kyle, can you speak a little bit to how you coach your customers through finding the right product, and talk a little bit about that price point concept?
Thanks, Steve. We consult on both sides. The hardware selection for new formulations, we work with our manufacturers to help them understand how to adjust the heaters for terpene content and the decarb level. And then we work with our clients to help them match their oils to the right pore size, coil resistance, and tank capacity. So I like to see these things like a modern magic wand. It's a blend of science and alchemy. It's the passion of the grower to create the flavor, and then the alchemist is the extraction artist that takes that raw biomass and turns it into a representative oil formulation, and then that has to match and pair well with the engineering of the device in order to deliver that full spectrum experience. So to Adam's point, I'm proud to say we just bought our engineer a viscometer last year. That was one of the sort of holy grail destinations for me, was to really dive into helping our clients understand each and every variation, because the same process with the same strain can be consistent. But when you have companies that are putting out, let's say 6, 12, 20 different strains, there's a lot of variation within that oil content, even though it's processed on the same equipment. So with the trends in flavor and live resin, we're seeing a massive growth in the, let's call it exotic terpene content, these advanced profiles. So we're looking into new heater cores with optimized heat ramping to avoid any terpene flash off when you're pursuing that cannabinoid rich experience. And personally, I feel that we're going to see a massive and fast shift into new technology in the next 12 months. And personally, I'm doing my best to prepare for that.
Kyle, you hit an interesting point. And I know one of the my pet peeves about vape carts, or at least from a manufacturing standpoint, I seem to hear a lot of folks saying I can only put a decarb to THC in a vape cart. It has to be distillate. I can't put THCA in because it's going to clog up the cart. And so I'm going to direct this question to Sawyer to start out with, and then I'll branch out to Kyle and Adam. Sawyer, what are you seeing in terms of an evolution of people using THCA, high terpene formulas, and how's that affecting the vape filling process?
Yeah, so we do have quite a few customers who are doing THCA in the Vape-Jet, and it's really just about the temperature that you're using there. It's kind of a tricky game, right? Because the whole idea on that hemp side is that it's going to be decarb as soon as you hit it, right? It doesn't really make a lot of sense, because usually when you think about THCA, you're thinking about the isolate. So it's kind of a catch-22. There is more research being done on that factor. But I would say just kind of bringing back the viscometer, the viscosity point, because I think that's just so core to a proper vaping experience, is that, you know, the Vape-Jet in and of itself has sort of a viscometer. It has basically a way to measure the true volume of oil versus the weight post fill to make sure you're marrying the actual molecular weight and the volume to make sure it actually has the density down pat. Otherwise, you really have nothing. You know, you might have the COA, you might be able to kind of use a proxy from pattern recognition of other times we've served customers with different oils. But, you know, to your guys' points with rosin, especially, if you don't get that viscosity right, you're not going to hit the nail on the head as far as that product goes, whether on the filling process or the actual hardware side.
Adam, what suggestions are you giving your clients for doing live resin, rosin type THCA products, high terp products?
Well, obviously, material change. We're noting that first and foremost, but our inverted fill technology has actually allowed a lot of that. Is like, if you think about it, when you fill, the oil is actually at its worst scenario. It's at the hottest it's ever going to be. You have atmospheric pressure pushing down, and it's being forced into a heating core while it's really, really hot. So, like, at that point, like, how could you expect the heating core to not like overflow and clog and pop, right? Like, we've created a few patented techs where, like, you know, your step core technology essentially creates like an extra wall to prevent that overflow from the initial shot down. I'm sure, Kyle, you've experienced that and worked on similar tech too. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? If you're feeling this way, that's just inevitably going to happen. So in our minds, we're like, what if we flipped it? You know, if we allow the oil to cool before it hits the heating core and naturally saturate, there's potential to, you know, not have that pop, clog, leak, and then default where the consumer is going to bring it back to the store and that falls back on the brand, right? These are just little nuances that pile up that could make or break it for you. So that's been one recommendation. It's tough, but again, it just really goes back to validation. Like, we can give you guys as many things as you need, and we're happy to go validate as much as it takes, because one, the more information that we can actually get and the better we do it, better experience it's going to be. But then we can dictate everything we do moving forward with product development, making suggestions to other clients. Like, all this takes a village. No one's figured it out to a T where there's a book where it's perfect. Otherwise we wouldn't be having these discussions, right? We just follow the book. So we need each other to continue to provide this data and keep driving the, hey, well, it's good, but could it be better? Right? And that comes with validation. So I think I would just encourage people to do like similar, like I always tell people, like, we'll send out a voltage regulator and a viscometer, right? Start low and rise up, because you're going to find a sweet spot where there's flavor and cloud and you're going to get it. Once you start going too high, it's ruined. So there's like little techniques you can do, like going through this process to dial it in, but take the time to do it, because it's going to impact everything future forward to make your brand successful.
Well said, Adam. Well said. I'm a big fan of quick capping and flipping myself. There's theories on both sides, but it makes sense to me that if you can cap in less than 2 minutes and then flip that cart to get that hot oil to run away from the core rather than penetrating it. So we do put that on the inside of our sample packs, just a quick filling guide of what we believe the best SOP is, because it's amazing how many different theories customers have about the process. And then we even put a flavor cloud chart on there. You know, the sweet spot for ASCERA is about 2.4 to 2.3 volts in order to get a good tasting cloud. Not the biggest cloud, but a good tasting cloud. So with the live resin compatibility, the vapes before had instability because of the poor heating system, the clogged air paths, and ASCERA's ceramic matrix stabilizes oil during vaporization to resist clogging, even with sugary or saucy materials. So one of the riddles that I discovered on my journey into vape is, I like to call it the crystallization yin-yang theory. So I believe that THC and CBD are a yin-yang. They should be enjoyed together. They enhance each other. But CBD and THC are polar opposites. So this was a part of the journey for me, is that THCA and CBD versus CBDA and THC are wildly different in how they perform in a vape tank. The theory goes that CBDA is what you want in a vape tank because CBDA remains in its oil state when it's not decarboxylated, which is the polar opposite of THC. THCA will crystallize in a tank unless it's decarboxylated because the THC remains in oil state. So we talked about this in our article we worked on together, or at least I mentioned, Steve, the possibility to put some THCA content into a formulation because that undecarbed material has a greater weight. But my understanding is that you need the THCA content to be below 40% so that it doesn't start to auto-crystallize the formulation. So you need a combination of THC with some THCA in order to have both in the tank. And to Sawyer's point, my belief is it all converts at time of vaporization. But the main clincher is that you don't want to decarb your CBD in formulation. You want to keep that CBDA in your formulation in order to keep the cannabinoids in an oil state. So that's where I've gone down that rabbit hole, and it is confusing, but I think it's really important that formulators that are starting to use CBD up here in Canada, there's an exciting development right now. The Quebec government has not allowed the sale of vapes until this year. So that's 24% of the Canadian population that has never had access to legal vapes. And so that's changing in November this year. 8.5 million people in Canada are about to hit the vape market. So vapes are already 20% of the sales in Canada, but 24% of the market didn't have access to them. So I think we're going to see a massive shift in the trends in 2026 for vape consumption in Canada. So we're pretty excited about that.
And Sawyer, is there something you'd like to add to this whole formulation concept? Because that's a big piece of creating a successful vape cart.
Yeah, I suppose one of the, a bigger point here is just the, being able to step back and actually do R&D with your partners. If you're not there in the lab, if you're not there on a video call when there's an issue, if you're not there as the manufacturer who's, being the subject matter expert to calibrate the machine to get those parameters right, if you're not there when the machine's down, none of this really matters, especially on the automation component, but especially on the formulation. We are here to educate, yes, but we're also here to be without ego and to take notes from our producers too. It is a constant, just reciprocal, process. It's iterative. Every single day that we go into a lab, we learn a little bit of the piece to the puzzle, and it's honestly what makes the job so fun, and makes me so passionate about discovering exactly what it is we need to do to make these devices, and overall for the end consumer to have the best experience. Really every oil is different. Really every piece of hardware, oil pairing, COA, viscosity is going to be different. So just dialing that in and learning what the next step looks like, especially as some of these new cannabinoids rise to popularity, has been a lot of fun.
Right.
It's been a lot of fun.
Well, in 2 weeks, I'll be heading off to Berlin, Germany to speak at the ICBC conference on extraction. And I remember last year when I was there was a big push towards medical. And I said to folks, and also a big push towards flower. And it's hard for me to communicate to folks in new markets what a dominant force vaping is going to become. It starts as flower, and then it evolves into really a 50-50 market of flower and oil in most mature markets. And so the one point or question I'd like to ask the group to close things out here today is, where do you see GMP, good manufacturing guidelines and practices, coming into play with vape carts? And I'll start with Sawyer. Tell us where you see GMP settling in with vape carts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we're going through a couple of IQ, OQ, PQ processes currently with some of our UK customers. We're doing that whole certification process right now. So we're just kind of starting the preliminary, still early days within Europe. So it's taking some time, and we really have to do it right. We don't want to do it quickly. We want to make sure that every piece of the Vape-Jet is designed so that, anyone comes in and, in GMP and can see exactly how this was thoughtfully created to protect the consumer, right? And currently we believe that, we're in a really nice state at the moment. With the machine is set up for success there, but we're kind of going through those paces. And thankfully we have some partners abroad who are also helping us do that, which again, just kind of harkens back to this is, yes, we can be the subject matter experts to the folks in Europe as well. But they're going to be the subject matter experts in some ways to how we're actually going to educate the consumers in their country. And that's another kind of piece there, right? It's, vapes and finished products in general, they have better margins. They hold stronger in hard markets. And the same is going to be true from everything I've heard from our partners also in Canada, exporting to Europe currently, in Australia, and the early days there in Europe in general. So yeah, I guess that's all I got to add for now.
And Kyle, being in a Canadian market, primarily, I know you work in other markets, but you're based out of Canada. What differences do you see between the Canadian manufacturers that are required to be GMP and the European manufacturers and the US manufacturers that don't have their eye on GMP yet?
Well, that's an interesting question, Steve. I think my understanding is that Canadian manufacturers are not required to be GMP. They just need to pass whatever Health Canada puts in front of them. The requirement for GMP comes into export. And for any Americans looking for a path to Europe, come up to Canada. I'll show you around. There's a lot of good investment opportunities up here. I'm not sure if Trump's going to get away with legalization, considering all the havoc he's created in the last few months. So in my experience, I think Canada has a huge runway advantage of legal export over the US. So right now there's at least 3 OEM vape filling operators in Canada that have full European GMP in order to export a GMP product. So it's mainly a paperwork operation that you need to have the facility, the team, the SOP, and the device that's going to pass the stringent testing in Europe. What we've done to prepare for these markets is ASCERA has a subsidiary based in Europe, which is required in order to get the CEG registrations, in order to have the products registered for import into Europe. But if you're filling in Canada, then there's an export mechanism. So we're working with several clients right now that are exporting to Portugal on the path to Australia, England. The market you're heading to, Germany, we've determined is not requiring GMP because now it's no longer a pharma controlled spectrum, in that ISO 9000 should be enough to enter the German market. But the exciting frontier for us is France. France is coming online soon. It looks like they've got an excellent program, which is vape specific, because the French government is not supporting smoking of cannabis. So it's all going to be vaping in France. And we've been doing a lot of background groundwork, making sure our factories are ready, making sure our certifications are ready, and getting our products ready for those markets.
Adam, how about yourself? What's Ispire doing to prepare themselves for GMP markets? And maybe you could add a little bit about what you're doing in the European market as well.
Yeah, of course. Definitely playing the long game in Europe. A lot of it's the certification, stability testing. Now that we have the upgraded plastic known, getting going with the guys in Lisbon, Portugal. So My Pharmaceuticals is a renowned testing lab there. Work with a lot of the big players in Europe. But The end goal there is to get that 6-month, 12-month stability test where we can have a EU GMP certificate, medical grade pods, and build that out. Certain disposables, other moving SKUs, we'll put through the testing too. I know there is inevitable end to disposables at some point, but knowing that we've found an engine that works really, really well with preserving the medicine, or call it recreational medicine, if you will, really, really well. It definitely serves a purpose to go through with those certifications. But we've already started getting some of those certs through our partners in Canada and over in Europe as well. A lot comes with ISO and CE, but it was really the UL certifications for batteries to make sure that it was an upgraded standard of battery. So if you're shipping internationally, nothing's going to go wrong. Again, all falls back to consumer safety. So I'm actually glad we're pushing the narrative and having these conversations. It's slightly upsetting that none of the large MSOs and public companies in the US are not actually focusing on this yet. Because one, it's not setting them up for international export. Like, I definitely want to be the first one to have it if I was them when they go out. But two, it's like, if you knew something was better out there, why wouldn't you just build the supply chain stronger for it now?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, you can eventually, everything's going to come down, but lead by example. There's like, we're cutting you can cut corners on a ton of things, but don't cut corners there, right? Like, cut corners on packaging. You can cut corners on automation by finding a better machine like a Vape-Jet, rather than hand fill in a cap until your thumbs are raw, you know. But and there's other ways to do it too. Like, we built out our Malaysia factory a few years ago and went operational last April. And now we have all these impending tariff risks. It's like, yeah, we're going to build a supply chain strong enough to work out of multiple countries. I think a lot of other people are now looking at where to go. Like, we were just like, it doesn't really matter who wins the election here. I feel like we're inevitably driving toward something. So we tried to stay ahead of that and built that factory space out, because again, we don't want to cut corners on quality. You can cut corners on tariffs by actually doing the manufacturing in another country. Great. But we'll uphold that quality standard forever.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic panel. I want to thank you all for your time. And I'd like to introduce just one last question to each one of you. I'll start with Kyle. What's one last thought you'd like to close out with, to leave our audience thinking about as we bring this down to an end? Kyle?
Thanks a lot, Steve. I think, coming back to the article we just worked on, the death of distillation. Distillate isn't dead, but it's commoditized. So the growth is in character-rich, strain-specific, full-spectrum oils. And ASCERA is ready with hardware that respects that nuance, because we're not here to mute the plant. We're here to amplify it. So at ASCERA, we believe the future of vaping lies at the intersection of safety, science, and soul. We're not just making carts. We're crafting experiences that reflect the integrity of the oil and the culture that surrounds it.
Well said, Kyle. Sawyer, one last thought?
Sure. Yeah. I just wanted to say, thank you guys for having Vape-Jet on the podcast. This has been a ton of fun. I'm really excited to see continually how this market shakes up. I'm excited to see, we are iterating on the machine, listening to our customers, helping our fill techs daily. And, I'm excited to be at the forefront of concentrate packaging. Vape-Jet's kind of led the way as the number one automated US-based filling machine for quite some time now. And what we're primed to do, these next couple of years is really exciting, given all of these factors that we're talking about here today, and making sure that, especially again, just kind of wanted to add on the GMP side, making sure that entire fluid path is validated. Those materials are what we say they are, and they're all food safe. And then it can be a repeatable process that's low labor, low headache, and can adapt to how the market just continually changes. So thank you, guys.
Excellent. Adam, closing thought?
Just keep driving education. Like, as people are starting to explore live rosins, like, hone in on the terps, hone in on something other than the percentages, because like everyone goes percentage crazy, and I don't know where that started or came from. So as we're re-educating, just take the opportunity to do that. It always irks me that I don't know where it came from, but no one's going in and buying moonshine in the store. They're drinking Bud Light and White Claws. So I don't know how we back that up, but we'll figure it out, I guess, as we go here. But and then, the last bit is there's a lot of competition in the U.S. markets. There's a lot more excitement around the world in Europe and in these emerging markets where people haven't backstabbed each other yet. Just a friendly reminder that there's a lot of people that we're up against. We need to work together. So I want my last closing statement to be, we need each other more than ever in the world, but especially in the cannabis industry. So while you may look at somebody as a competitor, please look at them as a friend, because sharing the wealth of knowledge of what we're building and what we're doing is what's going to get us to the next level. So
great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I think we'll have to do this again next year. This is a great session. For anyone that would like to reach out to Adam, you can do so at Get Ispire or on Instagram. You can reach Kyle at ASCERA.ca. The CA is for Canada. He's also on Instagram, and Sawyer Sheppard at Vape-Jet or on Instagram as well. And you can see this session as well as many of our other podcasts from SciPhy at SciPhy Systems on YouTube, or visit us on SciPhySystems.com, where you can also download that recent article, The Death of Distillation. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today.